For so many of us, the library has been a sanctuary prior to the pandemic. It's a great place to escape. But they've had to change their ways, like so many of us throughout the pandemic. And to talk a little bit more, let's bring in Juliane Morian. She is the director for the Rochester Hills Public Library. Juliane, great to have you with us.
Thank you. My pleasure to talk libraries.
I love the library. It is one of my all-time favorite places. When I was growing up in a little town in Tiffin, Ohio, we got a new library and it was so exciting. And every Saturday morning, that was my escape from the world. Do you see that's still happening today?
It is. It is. We serve so many different generations. So as you pointed out, so many people have that connection to the library because it was a place that they came when they were younger. Typically, their parents were bringing them. But for many people, it was also an escape if the library was walkable, like ours is for many people in our community. It was a nice respite for kids to go to after school. But again, like I said, we serve so many generations. I think we serve about 5 different generations, and that's not typical of your average business. So we have a variety of touch points for you, whether you're young, old, young at heart, however you want to experience the library, we're here for you.
You know, when we think about the library, it's like these old school images, right? You go in, there are the lines of shelves with the dusty books, but it's changed over the years. You're trying to accommodate changing technology as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yes, we are so much more than books. I think if you meet any modern day librarian, that is going to be one of the first things that we share with you. We love our legacy of being books and of reading, so we will never abandon that mission. But we are now all about computers. We're about ebooks and e-audio. We are about STEM kits and having things that help with experience-based learning. Our library has a 3D makerspace lab. And 3D equipment that you can print on, and anything from the Cricut printers where you're doing vinyl cuttings to Glowforge where you're doing etching into wood. We are all about tapping into how you want to improve your life and the learning that you want to do. It used to be in the form of books, but we've expanded beyond that container for many years now.
I'm sorry, I got distracted with that word Cricut.
Yes. So if you're a crafter, you are welcome to come to the Rochester Hills Public Library and partake in our makerspace lab. We call it the Eureka Lab, where you can actually come in and cut out your vinyl, whether it's for something that you're going to, adhere to your walls or on, crafty kind of mugs or scrapbooking or whatnot. So we are here for you in a variety of ways.
That is really amazing. So as you've been able to shift what you offer to the public, how have you had to shift throughout the pandemic?
Yeah, it's a great question. So of course, like many people, we did the shelter in place that was instituted for all businesses and all communities, facilities and everyone back in May and June. I made it a priority to try to reopen as quickly as possible once we felt we were safe. So we reopened our doors to the public back in July. There were some things that were a little different. So like many of the places that we visit, face masks are required, 6 feet distance is required. And the one very visible difference is that we did make the decision to remove chairs from all of our workspaces and from our group study rooms. And that's simply because we're in a mode that we call grab and go. So we want people to come in. We want you to be able to use the library, browse our shelves, find out what meets your fancy that day and take that material home. What we can't allow for right now is people staying and lingering in the library. And so that remains true even now about 10 months later in terms of what we can offer to the public, but we are open all of our traditional hours. We are welcoming people back into the library, whether it's computer use or browsing. And if you don't feel comfortable coming to the library, we are fortunate to have the kind of facility that has a drive-through, so people are able to use us in that capacity if they would prefer.
So with that, we're talking with Juliane Morian. She's the director for the Rochester Hills Public Library. And with that, when it comes to being able to access the computers, because we do know there are some people that don't have computer access at home. So it really has become kind of their lifeline.
Yes.
Are you trying to limit the time that they're using it? How is that working?
It's a great question. So what we tried to do was figure out what is that sweet spot between what are those must-do activities right now, especially those things that are related to in the fallout from COVID. So whether it was in the summer months and somebody perhaps was searching for a new job because they had lost their job, or whether it was in the fall when they were trying to get their COVID test results and they had to report that to their employer or to their school or whatnot. And now what we're seeing is a demand for computer access because they need to get their vaccine appointments. We try to figure out what is that sweet spot that allows them to complete the work that they need to do, but they're not staying, in an excessively long time in the library. For our library, we made the decision that 60 minutes felt like the right amount to offer. Other public libraries might have a different increment. And again, we respect the fact that each public library had to make the determination based on their resources and what's happening in their community at large.
And so what we love is because it really is a sanctuary for so many people. But on top of that, have you seen more and more people that were reluctant to go electronic now being forced to do so? Even just the things like check out a book.
It's a great question. Our senior management team is actually having lots of these discussions right now because we had to accelerate the learning curve of how to do things on your own. You had to figure out how to check out an ebook or even use self-check, whether you were coming in the library. Our team is spending some time now figuring out the fact that we might have changed how our library customers use us. We've created a new kind of library patron. So for some of our customers, it was a new learning experience, but they've taken to it. And our like I said, our drive-through has exploded in terms of popularity and use. So people who might not have been exposed to using the drive-through now are clued in terms of how convenient that is and how readily available it is. And we don't see that going away. And that's fine by us. It's us saying we can step up and be responsive now. If we've created a new kind of library patron, how are we going to then modernize our library to kind of keep that momentum going? What do they love about what happened during the COVID times? What do we pull forward? And then, like you said, once we're allowed to kind of allow for the soft seating and allow for the study tables to come back, how do we tap back into that idea of being that sanctuary and that third place once we're allowed to do so safely? So yes, our patron has changed, but we're going to lean into it and say, we've just hit fast forward on modernizing the library experience, quite honestly.
Juliane Morian with us here on the MegaCast. She's the director for the Rochester Hills Public Library. And with that, Juliane, if I can ask too, though, some people don't understand if I'm downloading a book, if it's an electronic version, why is there still a waiting list on some of the popular books?
It's a great question. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for actually allowing me to talk on that, because if we had our druthers here at the public library, we would buy as many copies as was available for people to use simultaneously. Unfortunately, though, the distribution model from electronic publishers does not play nicely with what we want to do in terms of what we remember how a physical book circulates. So the big vendors that allow for libraries to purchase ebooks. So we can't just purchase it through Amazon or from whatever ebook vendor, the average consumer can purchase from. We have a very small and select group that we can purchase from. They unfortunately control the rights of access to those. So we have to pay more than the average consumer for a book. So whereas the average consumer would pay maybe around $10 to $15 for an ebook, for the typical library book, it's around $60 to $80. So not only is our cost higher,
What?
I know.
You just saw my jaw just dropped on that price, right? You saw it. I was like, what?
We're really good at stretching the taxpayer dollar, though. So I got to be honest, my team is amazing at figuring out that right ratio of what we should be collecting and whatnot. But we are constrained in terms of what the e-publisher will allow us to purchase and then circulate. So many of our copies are a single use only. So if you're borrowing a book that I want to read, I have to wait for you to return it, or else I would have to pay for an additional copy. So we are hoping and we are agitating for change with our publishers, and we could use community members like you to get a little outraged and help them understand that we want our ebooks to function like physical books. And we think that that's the right of all public to have access to ebooks.
This really is fascinating. And, I'm an avid user of the public library, and this is the first time I'm even hearing that side of it. So this is great that we are able to have this conversation so people can be aware of what happens in the process behind that. And also so we can kind of be a voice for you as well.
That's appreciated. It's a wonderful community partnership. We are here as the caretakers of your library. We want to make the best library for you, but it ultimately belongs to you. So we want to empower you with that knowledge as well.
So we know that the library has been changing also even prior to the pandemic, because we are seeing so many more people come to the library to check out movies and audiobooks and music CDs. How has that world been impacted throughout the pandemic?
For most of our traditional formats, that has remained steady. What we have done, though, is leaned into the fact that what we were seeing is this desire for self-directed, independent learning. We saw this with many of our kids that stayed home during quarantine rules, that parents and families had to get creative in terms of how do you supplement the day-to-day activities that were provided by our wonderful educators, but how do we expand and how do we keep it going? So right now, what I think you're going to see a revolution in public libraries is leaning into more experience-based learning. So sometimes libraries describe this as the library of things. We're describing it as innovative items. So we are looking to add things, whether it's microscopes or telescopes or electronic things that help you assess whether or not your home appliances are running in a green and healthy way. We just celebrated Earth Day yesterday. So we are going to be adding materials and objects and equipment that actually help you have a better life in terms of you understanding how your life and your home and everything like that is thriving, and supplement that from experience-based learning.
So how are events going right now, especially with kids? Because I think of like new parents with toddlers, they would introduce them into the library through talk times and this, that, and the other. How are those programs working right now?
Yeah, it's a great question. Again, our team is trying to read where our community is at. And I touched on the fact that for our area in particular, many of our students were learning from home, right? So there was a lot of Zoom interactions for their traditional education. As such, our team has stepped up. We do offer quite a bit of virtual programming in the form of Zooms, but what we've also tried to do is supplement with hands-on, and that's probably been our best received programs in this time frame. So we have a variety of things that we call take and make. So the idea is that you can register for our program, and you might be doing something from a yarn-based craft, or making sun catchers, or just doing a variety of sort of more hands-on programs. We have found those to be among the most popular that we are offering right now. But what's interesting about the Zooms is that our programming, our attendance has actually gone up. So where we were constrained to, limiting a lecture on a historical topic or something of interest to families and youth, to what we could fit in terms of those seats in a room. What we're seeing now is the medium of Zoom is allowing us to extend this well beyond our walls. And our attendance is actually better now when you count those numbers of views and people watching us than we were in terms of capturing people in the seats.
Do you think that's going to continue post-pandemic then? Or maybe a hybrid model?
I think we're going to see a mix of both. And that's what I mean when I say we are very keen to the fact that we have created a different kind of library patron. So we pride ourselves on being incredibly responsive here at Rochester Hills Public Library. What our community can expect is us checking in with actual members of the community, doing focus tests and doing community surveys to find out what kind of programming do they like, what works well on a Zoom, on a virtual platform, and where do they want to see us return to more of that in-person, hands-on activities as well. So I predict it's going to be a hybrid.
That's a wonderful thing about Zoom, because I think if we would have had this conversation prior to the pandemic, so many walls would have been closed. Yeah. But now we become open to this, because for me, I think it's exciting. Like if you bring in authors,
yes,
to be able to speak, like you don't have to fly them in from California. Exactly. You don't have to fly them in from New York. You can put them up on Zoom and we can all listen and learn from it. Yes. Or even if you did bring them in, it's still reaching a larger audience.
Exactly. If I can speak to that. In fact, Rochester has a rich rich history of offering something called Authors in April. It's where we would bring in a variety of authors that spoke to sort of the younger set, whether it was like the K through 8, age range. And this year we are doing it as well. However, we shifted to May ever so slightly because of some of the pandemic issues. And
that's again, okay. It's like Groundhog Day. So April is May. We're all good.
Exactly. We're all kind of merging together. But nonetheless, so we will have an opportunity for some of those authors have made the decision to travel on site and they will be physically here. But the thrust of what they're going to be presenting to our youth will actually be done via Zoom. So again, it's that hybrid model of when it can be safe, when we can hold an activity where it's a meet and greet with the author outside, we're choosing to do that. But the majority of what will be broadcast to the kids is going to be via Zoom. So we're really looking forward to some of those events that are happening in May.
We're talking with Juliane Morian. She's the director for the Rochester Hills Public Library. I know at the beginning of the pandemic, we were all still learning new things about the virus and wiping down our groceries and, trying to disinfect everything. And now the CDC has come out to say, that's not really necessary. But I wonder when we're looking at some of the books or, the movies and things like that that come from the library, how did you all and your team approach that? And where are you today?
Covering your nose.
Thanks. That's a great question because we like to reassure people that we are complying by all of the CDC guidelines, the MDHHS guidelines. But to your point, you're correct. Most of these respected industries have not come out saying that we need to be overly cautious about the transmission of the virus on surface. What you're going to see among libraries, though, is that we conducted some internal studies. They were funded largely through the IMLS, which is the Institute for Museum and Library Services, in terms of trying to understand what happens with COVID persisting on surfaces of stuff that's circulated. And most libraries have chosen to implement some sort of self-quarantine. We do not have a mandated quarantine for materials, but most libraries felt like it was just going to engender more trust with our community to have some level of quarantine. So here at my public library, we have brought that down to 24 hours. We were higher at one point. Now we've brought it down to 24 hours. But what we often like to point out that is if anyone was concerned about materials having some trace of the virus from person to person, most libraries offer what's called a holds pickup process, where you have about 3 to 5 days to come in and pick up material that you have requested online. So if somebody felt it was necessary for them to have a few more days where that item just sat on a shelf and we let the natural course of science do its job of letting that virus dissipate, you could also put something on hold and let it persist for a little bit longer. And then I think you're more than safe to use materials from the library.
This really has been such a learning process in so many different areas of our lives. And it's great that members of your team and yourself are able to try to recognize some of the concerns within the community, because we're all learning about this together. So one of my favorite things to do is to go to the big book sales. Most public libraries will have the big book sale once or twice a year. Secret. Wait until the last day when everything goes cheap and you get the big paper bag for $5 or $10 and fill it up. Do you anticipate the book sales going to return?
Yes, I do. And I'm so happy you set me up to ask about this, because we actually have appointment slots tomorrow that if somebody were interested, they would be welcome to sign up. So what we've done at Rochester Hills Public Library is we are fortunate enough in our facility that we have a separate space that's dedicated to our used book sale supply. So our friends of the library take ownership of that. They're the ones who intake all of the donated materials from our community members. They make choices on what should go into what's called our quality sale, and that gets sold online. We have actually spots in our lobby where we have what's called lobby carts. And so we put some of our materials down there, which is just based on honor system, so people can browse and make selections there. Or we have this by appointment shopping for our used book sale room. And so our friends of the library have appointments available on Thursday nights and select Saturdays. So I would say just check on our website, sign up for a slot, and you'd be welcome to come and shop to your heart's content.
Well, Juliane, it's been so fun having you on the show. Anything maybe I didn't touch on that you want to add before we say goodbye for the day?
Just that, a modern library is more than books. And you have asked me so many of these wonderful questions. So thank you for having me today. And thank you for just helping me confirm for your community that's watching that if you haven't been back to your library in recent times, almost all of us have reopened for access. And we encourage you to come on back in and try us out.
It really is one of the best things that we have going for us. So it is a huge asset for so many of us in our community. And I'm always surprised people who say, I haven't been to the library since I was a kid and had to write a research paper. I'm like, what? No, you don't understand. It's not the old library.
Yeah. We have definitely modernized. We are a contemporary library that loves our foundation in books, but we are so much more than books. And what I often say is we were the original subscription service. So it's your tax dollars that works. A lot of times they align us with being a free service, but what I like to point out is that we hope to be a very good return on investment for your tax dollars. So you have already paid for us. Come on in and enjoy what your tax dollars are doing.
Well, thank you again for being with us. We so appreciate your time and also all the work that you and your team are doing over there at the Rochester Hills Public Library.